So I went through, my dad was an alcoholic. He was functional. He worked in coal mines, and then later he became a federal inspector, which was a big job, big time job. He'd be drunk, smashed on the weekends, work hard during the week, and in the evenings he would be drunk. So that was a very difficult thing. So naturally, he would leave his whiskey out, and I started drinking when he's passed out, very young. I mean, the first time I ever got drunk was in the 5th grade. And so already, at a young age, I was in trouble. This is framing for the fundamentalism part. I was in trouble. I was smoking a pack of cigarettes by the time I was 10 or 11, a day, by the time I was 10 or 11. And I had this anger, even though I had a wonderful mom. I never want to break her heart in this phase. So I remember that, and this is going to sound strange, this is going to sound a little wacky, but you just have to take it as part of my experience. I felt like there was a big empty spot inside me. There was literally like there was a void in me, and I couldn't fill it. And I was a self-proclaimed atheist. I think a lot of that was more for drama, but I really did. I was angry at God, very angry at God. And I would even get around my friends and shake my fist at the moon and say, if there's a God, let him strike me down. I mean, I was so angry inside. But there was this void I couldn't get rid of, and so I tried to fill it with, alcohol. I tried to fill it with other things. Too young. I was way too worldly wise at that age. And I just was miserable. And I remember going to my room one night, and it's going to sound wacky, but I remember going to my room one night, and I heard a voice say, "You belong to the darkness, and the darkness will always own you." And I ran out of my room terrified. I was terrified. And I would break out in these sweats and sit out in the hallway, and this happened multiple times. I was terrified of the night, but it was the same thing over. You belong to the darkness, and the darkness will always own you. And so I believed in the devil. I believed in evil before I believed in God. I read Mein Kampf by Hitler. I read in 6th grade, Origin of the Species. I was an avid Mein Kampf, most boring book I ever read. I mean, it's terrible. But I was searching for something. And so this void got worse and worse. And I talked to my mom about it. And I said, "Mom, what is this? What is this?" She goes, "Well, you just probably growing up." I said, "This is growing up. I don't want to grow up. And it's this is horrible." And I remember one day, I knew I was in trouble. I knew I was in trouble. I was with some friends. We were sled riding, and I got so drunk. I was probably 12. It's a snowstorm, and I thought, God, there's something not right here. I need help. Well, this friend of mine became a Christ follower. She was in the Methodist church, which they were not fundamentalists, but she became a Christ follower, and I saw a huge change in her life. She went from being kind of wild to this person that really was, I don't know, she just was very grounded. And she liked me a lot, and she kept inviting me to church, and I said, no, I will never go to church. I don't want to do that. And she just wouldn't give up on me. And people said, well, you just need to understand, you're basically like, you're her mission in life. She's gonna try to save you. But I remember that darkness and that void, and I was so scared, and I thought I was going crazy. I thought, do I need an exorcism or something? What is happening to me? And so finally, to my LC, one of my friends, he started going, and another guy, and he goes, Jeff, if you don't go for God, at least go for the girls. And I thought, okay, maybe I can do it, but I was terrified. I walked over to the church many times. I got to the door and turned around, and she finally she called, and I said, if you walk in with me, I'll go. That's how afraid of just church and things that I was. And they immediately, as soon as I got there, they pulled me into the choir. Here I am, a young teen, messed up teen, young teen that claims he doesn't believe in God, and they let me belong before I believed. They pulled me into the choir, the youth choir, practice, and I had to sing all these songs, and they sung it about Christ, and they sung about Christ being the answer, how He filled the void. And that got my attention. And so finally I just couldn't, I said, well, is this true? I mean, this has been around all my life. How have I missed this? And so one day I was so ready. I was so tired of the dark and the voice, and I was so tired of the void. There's this little place called Elliott's Pond. I got a blog I'm going to be putting up about it. It's a place I got to, and it's, even though I'm no longer this rabid fundamentalist, that experience still holds me. You know what I mean? It still grips me. And I went over to Elliott's Pond. And I remember I went to the top, and I didn't know how to pray. I'd never prayed. I didn't know. And I went over the pond. It's beautiful. It's Elliott's Pond. It's a big old pond. It's got it's got a steep hillside by it, and there were horses and cattle. I mean, it's a small town, very rural, 1,500 people. And I crossed the creek, and there's this pipe I had to shimmy cross it to get to the other side. And once I got to the top of that hill, I just knelt down in the grass and I said, okay, God, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know I'm in trouble. And I said, I'm so sorry. All I know is I need Jesus. I can't live like this anymore. And I had an experience. I did. I mean, immediately the void was gone. It's never come back. It was like it was gone. You know, Paul talks about scales coming off his eyes, and just something happened. And I started crying for a while, and then I started laughing so hard I was rolling around the grass as the horses were even walking around trying to figure out what was going on. And that day was the beginning point of a transformation, you know? And all of a sudden, I didn't want to do the things I was doing anymore. I started feeling like, no, this is not good. So that introduced me to Christ. So I was in the Methodist church, and I started reading fundamentalist literature. This fundamentalist pastor kept giving it to me, and he later became my pastor, and I started looking at the Methodists as too liberal, you know. And so finally I left there to go to a fundamentalist, independent, even these things, premillennial, they put all these labels on Baptist church. And the pastor became like my father, like a second father to me, and because my other father was very absent. So he took me under his wing, and that's how that journey began as a fundamentalist. So, but I got to tell you, we talked about each stage has its own beauty, in the development. So for me, I got, on the positive side, it was so easy. No. It was, hey, would you say it was, yeah, it was so easy to be a fundamentalist. Oh my gosh. It was so, that point is wonderful. I am no longer screwed up. I got all the answers, And we know we're living in the last days. Apocalypse is coming, and Jesus is going to come any day and evacuate us. And our philosophy was take over the world and let the devil have it when the rapture comes. And hell, if you either go to heaven or you go to hell, kind of that back in black and white binary, what do you want to call it? And it was simple. This was right and this was wrong. And so I had all the right doctrines. Penal substitutionary atonement. God beat the hell out of Jesus, so he didn't have to beat the hell out of us. The Bible is the perfect book. At that point, I didn't question. I didn't even see the contradictions, So, I had all the answers. So at that point, there was a happiness and a bliss at that point to be in the fundamentalists. I couldn't wait to get to heaven. I can remember thinking about the woman at the well and how Jesus said she'd never thirst again. I felt that way. I can just remember feeling this deep inward confidence, and the mission was so simple. Save souls from hell. That was it. Get ready for the end, So my mission was to get as many people into heaven as I could. And I was very evangelistic as a young person. Even the people that hated me said, he's good at saving souls, And so I was 17 years old, leading people in their 50s to Christ. I don't know. And I was really good at moving people towards something. And I still have that gift. I can move people. Well, and one day this event happened. How those events happen in your life. In the beginning, they look like they're going to be very small things, and God uses small things, but then they can turn into big things. So my senior year in high school, we had an elderly preacher. He had a little tiny church, and we were a big church. So he would come to our church. His name was Scott, and loved him to death. He had the best sense of humor. So he was a coal miner and a preacher. Everybody was either coal miners or a farmer or farmers in our area. So Scott would come on Sunday nights, and Sunday mornings he'd be preaching in his church, and he goes, "Brother Jeff," he had this accent, "Brother Jeff," he said, "I want to talk to you." He's about 75. "I want you to do a revival meeting, 3-day revival meeting at our church." I said, "Sure." It's in April. I can remember is April. "That'll be fun. Yeah, we'll do it 3 nights." And so I went over to do this revival meeting. And then one night this man showed up. His name was Dempsey. Big, he was big. He literally looked like he would be, if you would put a bear suit on him, he could probably fit into it. And so Dempsey came, and Scott said, "We cannot stop these meetings. This is the meanest man, coal miner, moonshiner, and in the area. He's we got to keep going." So I'll never forget one night they were giving the altar call. You know how they do. in fundamentalist churches. And it was tense. It was just like a thickness, like something like, you know, right before it rains, you know how you can feel the barometric pressure, like something about to break? And I remember Scott walked back to him and said, Dempsey, if you want to walk, if you want to come to Christ, I'll walk with you. And he just, that big old man just wailed and came down, and his whole clan, like, so we were there. This thing went on for 21 days, 23 days. His whole clan came to Christ. By the time that meeting was over, we had 28 people in the valley that professed Christ, and most of them had no church background. And when we did the baptism service, we did it in the river, we had 400 people. They couldn't believe it, come to see this service. But I was under authority too. And so my pastor did not want me to do the baptizing, which was weird. He said, let Scott do it, you know, you're not ordained yet. So that really, I had to obey him, but everybody wanted me to baptize them. And so I was kind of under that authority. And so after that experience, I knew I wanted to be a preacher. I knew that was my destiny. And it was something about being a fundamentalist. It was like locked, certain. Every step of the way was just simple. It was locked, certain. I went to Liberty University. I was there when the moral majority was born. Ronald Reagan spoke at my, not my inauguration, my, what do you call it, graduation, yeah. And Jerry Falwell Jr. lived across the hall from me. I was there when Frank Schaefer was speaking, and he was part of the birthing of all that. So, and I remember at Liberty University, I started, I was a resident assistant, had a full scholarship, and had like 90 guys living in my dorm. And we had leaders, and I remember they all wanted to have communion together. The about 20 of us they were prayer leaders, and we were so excited. We were so excited about doing this. And I remember one guy got the bread, and the other got the juice, because you can't use wine in a Baptist school. And we were just looking forward to this intimate moment. And I thought, we're like the apostles, you know, like the early church, and we're going to have, so school found out about it, and they sent over about, right before it happened, 5 minutes before, to stop it. And they said, you're not ordained. You can't do this. And then I remember thinking, that don't make any sense to me, you know? Doesn't make any sense to me. I started struggling with that. And I remember, for me, my pastor, shifting back, one big thing I began to stand up on was race. I would not tolerate issue in any form. So my pastor, one Sunday morning, and he was on the radio too. He'd go into black neighborhoods with people. He said, they have their church and we have our church. But I'll never forget it. One Sunday, he got up and he had seen a mixed couple in Lebanon. And it just really upset him. And he started calling black people from the pulpit. And he was just free, and everybody's, amen, amen, amen. And I'm 14 or 15, I couldn't handle it. So after the service, I went up to him and I said, preacher, that was wrong. That was sin, that was wrong. I said, you have to apologize for that. That was evil. He got mad at me. He goes, who are you? Who are you to tell me? You know, he really put me down and kind of made me down here. Well, when I went to Bible college, I went to seminary, my pastor wanted me to come back and pastor the church, but I didn't feel I was supposed to. He committed suicide. right in front of the church. I mean, that's the kind of, and you weren't supposed to express doubt, by the way. That's another thing. I can remember getting up in the pulpit in college, and I was sharing my doubts. I said, you know, I said, folks, y'all pray for me. I said, I'm having some doubts in my faith here. I didn't know you weren't supposed to do that. I said, I love God, but I don't know. I'm wrestling here with this whole thing. Is everything predestined? Are we just chess pieces on God's board, or do we have free will? I don't know how all this works. And people were listening. They were like, I could tell we were connecting. My pastor took me back in the office, said, don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever do that again. Don't you ever express doubt as a minister. Don't you ever do that. And I was shocked. And then, you know, 2, 3 years later, he blows his brains out. And front of the church. And I got the news when I was in North Carolina. And he was so depressed. And had church, 400 people. That really just, it was like my dad died, you know? It was like my father died. And so when I went on to seminary, I was pastoring a church while I was in seminary. Big church, had a big parsonage, 4,000 square foot. And I made it clear to them before I came where I stood on issues. But they wanted me. And what I realized was there's a lot of churches that wanted my gifts, my preaching ability, my style. They didn't want my theology. And it came to a head one day when this very sweet young woman, she used her van to go pick up women from the unwed, what do you call it? Place where women are pregnant, that they kind of go to a place to stay. Wasn't to help them transition and will put their children up for adoption. I can't remember which, unwed mother's home, yeah. And so and one of them happened to be black. And first, they were upset that these unwed mothers were there. They were afraid they might influence our young people, like their young people weren't already having sex. And but the one who was black, this blew this man's circuits. And he went up to this precious woman who brought him. And he thought it was a church van. He said, I paid money for that van. He didn't know it was mine. He goes, oh, don't you ever bring any more knocked up to our church. So by that, I was done. I knew I had to do something. So I preached a sermon on a Sunday morning called, I put together a sermon called Peter and the Point. This is a change here that was happening. Peter, the Portrait of a Prejudiced Man. And I got up and just hit this thing head on, race. And I went through Peter's struggle and what God has called clean, you don't call unclean. And at the end of and I went through the Old Testament. Moses' wife, you know, she was black. And I went through all this stuff and I said, just rip it out of your Bible. Go ahead, rip all. If you fundamentalists can't handle, just rip these things out. And I went, this don't suit you, rip them out. And at the end, I can't believe I did this, Dr. Page Patterson, I don't know if you know that name. He was president of Southern Baptist Convention. He was a member of our church. I was his pastor for a while. At the end of the service, I gave an altar call. This is the advantages of being young sometimes. I said, when you do this stuff, I said, those of you who want to repent of the sin of racism, come forward now. And Patterson later said, that was the toughest altar call I've ever seen. And they did. Major chunk of the church, elderly, they were weeping. I mean, it was like they thought the floor was going to fall. They were weeping, but my leaders were standing in the back, the ones, and one man said, I repent, but Pastor, they're going to destroy you. You won't last 4 months. They've got a lot of power. And he was right. And this church went through, it was that sermon was the proudest moment of my ministry. And I still have a copy of that. And I look back on that day as one of the most defining moments of my life. And so they did. After that, they made my life a hell, blocked me, fought me. In the church, I could not reconcile how Jesus said, love our neighbors ourselves, love our enemies, I couldn't reconcile the hatred that I saw in the church. And that it was more about culture. I almost said, that case, Southern culture and racism, and that they had created their own simplicity. This is how life is. And it began to break me. And I remember I was coming out of a nursing home one time during this time. I'd been preaching. And these guys were waiting on me. And I felt something snap inside me. I didn't know what it was. I just felt like a psychic. And I went numb. I tingled all over. And I remember I went to McDonald's. And I started shaking. I go, God, what's wrong with me? And I was proceeding with all this going on. I didn't go to, it took some time before some friends said, Jeff's in major depression. He needs medication. He needs help. And so I began to lose that simplicity. I began to lose that joy, that simplicity, and realize what I love God, I love Jesus, but with this package, there's this whole political agenda that you have to buy into. And you can't be a Democrat. God forbid, there's a political agenda. There was an ideology about Israel. There was and the list goes on and on. And I just woke up and said, I don't think I can do this.
Oh, no, 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 look what I've become. Black and white, left and right, aren't we all in this fight together? Oh, no, 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 look what I've become. Us and them, Repub and Dem, we're all gonna drown if we don't swim together. We can't pretend it's gonna go away. No, 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 not today. We can't pretend it will all just go away. Let's not pretend it's gonna go away. Never act and only pray, because it never, ever really worked that way. oh, look what we've become. Famine and feast, beauty and beast. I just want to help and hold the least of these together.
You know, when these things first started, I had, you know, asked myself, you know, what could be causing this? This is very early on. And you may remember that I thought of a couple of things that maybe it could be. I had taken apart an electric clock, an alarm clock, just to investigate what was in there. I was kind of science-y, just gadgety kind of person. I was also, bless you, not very bright because I didn't unplug the clock. And so as I'm taking it apart, the screwdriver hit the, you know, hit the coil, and I got a pretty good shock, and so thought, well, that maybe that was it. And then one week at summer camp, I wanted to be as cool as possible. Who doesn't at summer camp? And so I didn't wear my glasses, and oh boy, I need my glasses. Well, by the end of that week, I literally, just as I was like getting picked up and going home, my head was about ready to explode, and I was vomiting from the, you know, from the headache and the eye strain. And so I thought, well, you know, maybe that was it. And then dismissed that as this thing began to build. And I was always, especially initially, looking for some sort of pattern. You know, well, it always happened at this time or this day or in this place. And the fact that, you know, I couldn't find any pattern was for me evidence, further evidence that there was a demonic piece to this, that there was something evil behind it, because it was that being caught off guard when it happened, because it was always so random that it couldn't be predicted, controlled. You know, it was chaotic, and you know, chaotic, chaos, not good. You know, God ordered, structured. You know, Earth around the sun every so many days, right? Patterns, order, thought, all of that. So that's why the chaotic, unpredictable nature of it for me was further evidence that it was not good. But yeah, they all had that sense of, you know, the world just being twisted upside down and weird things going on in my head, and everyday stuff just would register as something different in my head. So a priest would become Abraham Lincoln, you know, that kind of thing. I didn't see, it wasn't so much like monsters or I didn't, you know, Satan, any of that, which I thought was part of Satan's logic. It's like, well, that, you know, keep some mystery around this. I'm not just going to appear before you, but will turn your world upside down. Because I think it was with John Evie, and the devil came to visit me, and he turns into an alligator, like right there in front of me, and this jumbled sense of a mess that, you know, going on in my head. And dude, my head hurts bad, you know, for hours after this thing, you know, after the devil comes. It comes and goes pretty quickly, but the pain is there for hours. I think part of it was you know, I was kind of deserving of it, you know, because I wasn't good enough. Yeah, you know, I was, yeah, you know, I used some foul language, wasn't good with my brothers sometimes, you know, stealing that money from my own parents, impure, all those impure thoughts of a, you know, 12-year-old. I felt there was probably good reason why I was the one, you know, and it's convoluted, because as a kid too, then there's part of me that's like, well, you know, I am an altar boy, and you know, Satan's gonna target someone. You know, he's gonna want to target someone who is committed to the church, and he's kind of an insider, and he's gonna want to pluck someone like me versus some other kid who isn't necessarily that engaged in the faith or that involved in the church. You know, I was a real get. You know, I was. I made them up, you know, just inspired by things I encountered, which was, you know, mostly just a bunch of prayers and rosary around my neck and holy water, and but the pinnacle, you know, was the burning of the wonder bread over the votive candle for its purification, because the candle came from church. So I thought, well, that makes the bread holy, you know, the flame. The fact that I stole the candle from church, right, was something that I chose not to focus on. But yeah, I said a lot of prayers. Mostly just up, you know, in my head, even when I was at school and that kind of thing. But anytime I wasn't doing something else, I wasn't thinking about something else, it was a way to, you know, knock out a quick one. And, you know, the old do the sign of the cross. Though I got to the point though where I did it in my head without moving my hand, because I was worried if people saw me doing this all the time, they'd be like, you know, I was worried I would, you know, tip people off that I had an issue, because they saw me. Yeah, I was at that youth banquet and the youth leadership banquet, waiting for the announcement to be made as to who amongst this group would be chosen to represent the state of Ohio at the national gathering. And I was a finalist in this group. And they had as a group of boys and girls from around the state. It was the Hugh O'Brien Leadership Award, after the actor who played Wyatt Earp, I think it was, back in the days, right? So I don't know exactly how that affiliation came about, but so we were at the banquet, and it was a brunch. Dessert was being served. It was a sherbet or something, and the devil, of course, here I am. I'm contender to represent the state of Ohio nationally. I'm gonna like win this thing, right? And just moments away from the big announcement. And of course, the devil comes to visit, to ruin this moment. And of course, by then, I mean, it's like, I had this down. I knew what to do. I'd be fine. I'd come out of it. You know, people would ask some questions. Is it, you know, hey, what do you know, you okay? You know, yeah, I'm thinking about my homework or thinking about my girlfriend, you know, or whatever. I'm stressed or, you know, whatever. And then the next thing I know, I come to actually in the back of an ambulance. So they had, you know, called 911 or whatever, and I come to in the back of an ambulance, which, you know, took a second to kind of wrap my head around, but I thought, holy shit, like it's really happening now, because I'm going to a hospital, but then they're going to send me to treatment. Is all I've been exposed is all coming undone? And so I was crying. I began crying, like I'm sure I was just stressed to the max and worried and concerned. And so I'm crying, and they were telling me I had a seizure, which, I mean, I'm not even really sure I knew what that meant. You know, like I didn't even necessarily put the two, you know, together. Like, what? You know, yeah, that was, wow. That moment and the weeks and maybe even months to come, in some ways, I think was the most intense of all of it, because it was such a mixture of emotion. Yes, in one sense, hey, relieved, right? Like, after all of this, you know, here's a, you know, clear medical, scientific, you know, explanation. But there was also disappointment in the sense of, here I thought I was fighting this holy war, if you will, right? In this central battle between good and evil. And perhaps I have misinterpreted all of that. Disbelief, as I think I may have said in one of our previous sessions, you know, this is, I don't know, this could be Satan still, like, you know, I'm going to make you think it's this. The world's going to think it's this. So as I continue to take you over and work you, you know, move you towards insanity, this is just going to buy me, the devil, time, and people are just going to assume that these weird things that you're going through, it's some kind of medical condition. They don't realize that it's actually me, you know. So there's some of that. And then there's some of this, like, how in the hell could God let me go this long thinking this if this wasn't true? Which was, I couldn't come to grips with that initially. God wouldn't have let this go on. I mean, there was too much time. I had said too many prayers. I had done too much, you know, so many good works. Yeah, if
where am I going? And is there an easy way of knowing? Well, I've tried for so very long, but I just keep coming back to the same old song. How did I get here and where am I going? And how do I keep this fear from showing? Well, I've ducked, I've bobbed, I've punched, I've weaved the best I can. But these punches to the heart make it hard for me to stand. The day is just dawning, dig deep, but your hands are hardly dirty. Life happens, no warning, gets dirty. How did I get here and where am I going? And is there an easy way of knowing? How did I get here and where am I going? How did I get here and where am I going? How did I get here and where am I going?
I would say back in the day, and hopefully more so as I've been more reinvigorated by faith as of late through sobriety, they would say, you know, Brock sheds light, you know, that every time they experience me or in high school or college or even today, if I saw someone, I would hopefully put a smile on their face, you know, and shed God's light in one way, shape, or form, show them that I care and that I should treat others as what, you know, they want to be treated. And that's ultimately what I hope my faith has done for me throughout my life is treat others as I want to be treated. And I would say making Jesus and Christ my rock was my medicine. And as someone that enjoys talk therapy now on a professional level, I always had Jesus as my guidance counselor. He was my talk therapist, my best friend, and when I needed to get something off my shoulders, I would give that to Jesus. And that's the best way to describe it, is as medicine, as talk therapy, and always having that ghost that's there with you and walking by your side, and they're there for you to talk to and be with at all times, you know. And he's free for everyone. So it's the best guidance counselor. And he's free, and he's a Holy Ghost. So pretty awesome. Ryan was like my brother. We grew up on the same street together, and so he was akin to my brother, you know. Definitely was my first friend. So I would say I played with my brother Zach in the house, and then outside of the house, I would always go find Ryan, and we would always link up and go play. My mom's sister, she grew up on the same street as us, and she also ran like a daycare center, and so she was like another mom for me, which was great to have Ryan as like another big brother cousin that I went to school with, and we ended up kind of linking up and having the same group of friends all throughout elementary school and middle school and high school and college. So we somehow had this same group of friends and kept them all together. And then, you know, so Ryan was one of those guys, was one of those friends that I could always count on, and was always at the holidays, and I loved his character and his humility. He was such a humble, very, very Christ-like guy that wasn't aware of it, you know, was very much a zero ego kind of human being. And even though he was a great athlete and a tall, good-looking guy and had all these things going for him, was just very humble and almost lackadaisical, you know, just a very easygoing guy. But Ryan definitely had his doubts with faith, and those were some of the harder, more difficult conversations that we had on his deathbed, were because I definitely wanted, I wish I had the letter I wrote him, but yeah, it was wild that, like, I had written this letter that I wanted to read to him, and I knew this was probably the last day that I was going to have the chance to read it to him, and I went to the hospital to visit, and it was almost like the Red Sea parted and there was no one in the room. Normally my aunt's in there, my uncle or my cousin or a doctor or a nurse, or, you know. So finally it's just Ryan in the room, and so finally I was like, oh my God. So I read Ryan the letter that I wrote to him, which was more or less surrounded around the faith, because even though he had some of his doubts, I do believe he lived a life of faith, and that if he surrendered appropriately and prayed with me, and I hope and I pray that he did. I think he did. I asked him to pray with me for God's forgiveness, and that we recognize you as our King, and that you can solve all problems, including this one. Because, you know, I needed Jesus to take his pain away. So sorry. So I just asked him to do that, and that it was okay for Ryan to go to him. So it was okay for him to go to the light and to stop fighting. He was 30. He was 30 years old. He was 30, so that was 5 years ago now, 6 years ago. Yeah, it still feels like yesterday. But yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's always hard around the holidays. Yeah, he passed around, he passed December 15th or 14th, and his birthday's in January, and so that would be January 25th, which will also be my 1-year sobriety anniversary date, which will also be what would have been his birthday, and that would have made him 37, I believe. Yeah, he's 36. Well, he would. And he died when he's 30. I'm 35. So anyways, yeah, I definitely had a, excuse me, hard time with the, I was in denial, you know, just with the nature of the cancer and how quickly Ryan died. From the point that he was diagnosed to the point when he died was about 5 months, and that all went down a little too fast for me to digest. So that whole 5-month period that I was asking God for Ryan to like get out of the hospital, for the most part, you know, because he had just started his treatment and we were trying to get him out of the hospital so I could like take him to Vegas, you know, or go do something fun, or, you know, go skydiving, go do something other than chilling and sitting in a hospital. And then all of a sudden, you know, things kept taking a turn for the worse. And so he never really got out of the hospital. So I was certainly angry at God and had that whole, you took my loved one, well, I'm out. No more this Christian be nice guy. I'm going to go get hammered and screw this world. This world sucks, you know. Young people die. This is not what everything, I'm not everything happens for a reason kind of guy. You know, I kind of hard time finding that reason. Like why Ryan? Why him? So that was tough. And so I just turned my back on praying, and that lost that guidance counselor. And that's when I really started losing who I was losing that network, that guidance counselor that I've leaned on when I needed him the most. When I just lost my best friend to cancer is when I cut him off and just started drinking heavily, and that was very scary. And I'm lucky that I survived some of those trips that I was driving to and from on back in California and Nevada. That was 5 years ago, 6 years ago, before I had kids. So it was a dark time where I turned quickly and just said, screw it, screw I didn't value my life. I didn't value my career anymore. I mean, I was just going through the motions, and so I could get through the day, so I could get to the bottle, really. Being a highly functional alcoholic, let's say, what was it, 5 years on and off, highly functional alcoholic, you know, ever since I may or may not have prayed. I mean, that I wasn't really living a life of faith, that's for sure, or practicing faith throughout those drinking years. From the time Ryan got diagnosed to the time I got sober, which was January 25th, 2021, and that's when I finally read the big book. And it just poured my soul out, you know, and crushed me, and was just everything I needed and wanted, and finally got those answers and felt like finally someone understood me. Finally. And there's hope. That's the key thing that I felt for the first time in a long time. I felt hope and joy just from reading that big book and realizing, okay, I have a chance here. I mean, the biggest point of surrender for me always will be, I think, and I hope and pray, going back to January of 2021, when I was able to truly rededicate and surrender myself, and the willingness to serve Him and to serve others and to help others to obtain sobriety. If He was to spare me and to help me obtain sobriety and basically absolve me from that desire of that next drink, which is what I was begging God to do. You know, surrendering acceptance with Ryan and letting go, I mean, that was at the time a lot harder and caused me a lot more issues, I think, because I kept reliving that last visit with Ryan over and over and over again. He opened his eyes shortly afterwards, which I thought was a sign that he did hear and listen and speak, and told him I would see him later. And so just accepting life on life's terms is imperative in life. Just accepting life on life's terms, which isn't my terms. My terms would not have my best friend dying of cancer at 30. My terms would not be like that. So I wouldn't have lost the national championship in 2007. We would have won. We would have won the gold. You know, silver's not for everyone, but hey, we had to win silver that year. So I mean, it's just acceptance, and moving on with that acceptance is just something I've had to learn the hard way. I would say my faith growing up and pre-diagnosis was probably an unrealistic faith, one that, you know, never really had to deal with loss and grief, like to that extent, till we had that tragedy. My life had been pretty easy and pretty smooth, straight path, and was easy to think, oh, just follow God's path. His path is easy. And then all of a sudden, bam, God's path becomes a confusing one, and you're going, where do I go now? What is happening? How do I proceed? What, this, huh? Explain this one. So that was the curveball that sent me to say to hell with you. I'm going dark. I call it going dark. And to elaborate on that, I think it is pretty funny that I could probably say that when I go dark, when I drink, I would become somewhat of a pagan Viking, I'm instantly becoming the blood of my blood, which is the blood of a insatiable group of polygamous conquerors. And so when I was drinking, I was battling that bloodline that's deep within my loins, but so is the faith that's transcended centuries upon centuries as well. And it's conflicting daily. I'm still that human being that comes from that descending long line of faith, of blood and faith, and having those inner bipolar battles going on of good versus evil, or let's say pagan versus Christian. That definitely sums me up.
I live in a dark room, 4 walls and a dirt floor. I'm looking for light. I'm hoping that light won't pass me by. Children playing, I hear the sound of their laughter. My eyes start to cry. I wish I could fly away from here. Fly away from here. Seeks the kingdom. He knocks on heaven's door with bloody knuckles. He's weeping on the floor. Dirt floors are turning to blood and miry clay. Mercy, his rescue. Pull him through one more day. One more day. One more day. Hey, Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Hey, Mary, hey, Mary, hey, don't you weep, don't you moan. Hey Mary, hey Mary, hey Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Hey Mary, hey Mary, hey Mary, don't you weep, don't you moan. Hey Mary, hey Mary.
Roman Catholic altar boys we were, together. And and you know, that involved 3 hours on every Good Friday on our knees. And you know, I absolutely believed as a child. I mean, I remember believing everything they told me about Jesus, and I experienced a connection. I believed everything I was told. Well, we probably told everything about his life from the Roman Catholic view. And we told be quiet and suffer. And it wasn't until I went to high school till I had questions, and that was the beginning of a trauma. Well, they didn't really know. They didn't know what they were doing. That's the only way I can say it. They did what they were taught, and they imagined what was real, and so that's what they taught us. They didn't understand that we were children and that we trusted them. They were somewhat lost in the ideology of, practice this, and, don't turn your head, don't talk to anybody, don't get out of line. It's incredible. They were Nazis toward us as children. I was a leader, and so I was never, ever shamed or corrected. I just didn't ever do anything wrong that they saw. So, unfortunately, my sister got slapped, and she's never gotten over it. She got slapped in the face in front of the class, and the pain and the shame are part of her life. They didn't get that we trusted them, and they just didn't get deep love. I don't know that they had it. I think they just didn't understand intimacy. And they didn't understand that they were trusted, and their deal was to spread that trust around, to increase our trust in them, and to teach us the intimacy of Christ's teaching, not beat us. They just got lost in almost a militarism about beating it into us. So all the boys, I remember having an awareness of the 3 classes of boys ahead of us who just held the nuns as children and laughed at them. Just a nun stood up with a rubber band and said, I'm taking this to the FBI to get the fingerprints off it. If you'd like to stand up and identify yourself as the person who shot this rubber band. They just laughed at her. And they had to muffle their laughter, but they laughed at her face. And it was a time in my life where I just got these nuns just don't understand that we're bright. They don't get that we have a mind. I went to jail quite a few times. Traffic and not paying child support. This very large football player, very physically intimidating guy, I just felt compelled to go up to him and say, you know, I just put it this way, have you called your father? Have you called your father in heaven? He wants to hear from you. And this big, large black man just looked at me, and instead of what I feared occurred, he just opened right up. And apparently his mother had churched him through his life, and he just was wide open, and it was an incredible example of overcoming fear, because there could have been a serious downside to approaching him, but I just felt compelled to go to him and to have the conversation. And it was a great lesson in not being stopped when you feel led by the Spirit. Because I can remember the size of this guy, but he melted like a teddy bear. Well, the issue is whether it's my idea or I'm being prompted to act, and this is all through my life. It's happened many, many times because I read people as my brother and sisters. I don't talk to women that often because I don't want them to get the wrong idea of why I'm, you know. But many times it's just occurred that the conversation is pure, and so whatever needs to be spoken is prompted, and I'm open to it, and so it just occurs. And I believe people recognize that my heart is in the right place because of the way that I speak to them. I essentially ask them, how are you? And I believe they get it. I don't come from, you have to, I have a brother-in-law that's big on beating people up with, you have to repent. I don't speak that language. The story about the neighbor who had her gas turned off. I came home from church. I was a member of the Mormon church at that time, came home from church, white shirt and tie. I went door to door asking everybody, please just write me a check for $5. The men in the street, guys didn't even know me, but they knew they understood what I was doing. They tossed me $20 bills. Ran up and down 2 blocks, collected $275. Got very arrogant. I went to the public service, said, I got the money for the bill. They said, well, Mr. Daniels, the bill is $900. So that was quite a wake up. But then I got smart about how things work. Called the older brother of a childhood girlfriend. He's a senator. he called his buddy he went to high school with, who runs PSENG, and it got turned back on. I'm the oldest brother. I'm the oldest of 7, and I was taught to take care of my siblings. And because I naturally loved them, I had a mother who was a child, and the mother of 7, but she was a child. And she was just a loving human being. And because I was taught how to love my siblings and watch over them, when I went to grammar school, I was the oldest. I was born in October, and so I got kept back in school, and so I was always the oldest in my class. I perceived everybody as my brother, as my younger brother and sister. I didn't experience them as competitors. I felt they were my family. And that when I went into high school, I led and loved everybody. And I got caught up in the ego of it, but my main focus was to get everybody together. And in interacting with everybody in my class, especially the ones that people wouldn't speak to, there was a depth of gratitude that I experienced from those people so many times, because I just went up and acknowledged them. I saw them, and they knew that I saw them. And they were more moved because I was powerful socially. They were more moved because I expressed an interest in them, and I saw there was power in that, and so I did it as an older brother. And when I saw, people, I had a protective instinct, and that's how I operated. I just cared for people, and they understood it. I'm looking back at my entire life, and it's always been, since I was young, I always aspired. I had a love for Christ, and I never felt that he was distant, idealized. I felt he was my brother. I believed in him and perceived him as my older brother, who I never had an older brother. Many times people have said to me, you look very familiar. And what I understood that to be was that they saw Christ in me. And that's why they felt comfortable with me and thought that I was very familiar, because I was acting in that spirit, and that's what I understood when they said that to me. I mean, it's occurred, hundreds of times. People said, you're very familiar, like, I think I know you. I don't know if it has anything to do with it. I'm just prompted to say this. My brother died from AIDS. It took 7 years for him to die. So that was another formative experience in my life. For 7 years, I trembled. He's going to die, he's going to die. I actually trembled in fear of his death. In the moment of his death, I was in the room, the only one in the room with him, and I experienced that he was no longer in his body and that he had left. And a peace came over me that was the beginning of healing of the bipolar at a new level. I experienced a peace, an absolute peace, that I experience to this day, and that I feel distinguishes me from other people that I meet. And that was the base of bringing everything together. There's no turmoil. There's no human fear that's larger than peace. Being still in the face of men acting out in anger, frustration, fear, desperation, being still is the most powerful experience. And it can be communicated. And the most traumatized human being can attach themselves to your peace and rest. Well, I simplify it by saying that you have a brother in Christ who cares about you, and he'll take on your burden. So anything that you can let go of, you can confess, you can talk to me, or you can just speak directly to Christ. And there's nothing he can't love you through. His love transcends anything that you've experienced. And to just put your arm around someone at the right moment when it doesn't create fear. And I do include, when I feel it's appropriate, I say, you have a Father in heaven who wants to hear from you. He wants to hear from you all the time. He's interested in everything that you're doing.
Sometimes I feel so crazy. Sometimes I cry like a baby in the night. Hold me tight. Who's gonna stop these feelings? Who'll bring me down from the ceiling tonight? Hold me tight. When I am weak, will you be strong for me? I need to fall hard into your everlasting arms. I look for rhyme and reason. I'm looking for my freedom tonight. Hold me tight. I've lived through stormy weather. I'm living in the desert tonight. Hold me tight. When I am weak, will you be strong for me? I need to fall hard into your everlasting arms. So when I'm feeling crazy, and when I cry like a baby in the night,